later on today. Okay, great. All right, so everybody is seeing the lecture in terms of blood vessels and blood circulation.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's start. So blood vessels and blood circulation. Very important in terms of when we look at it, blood vessels and blood circulation, because we did look first week at the heart, first week we looked at the blood, second week we looked at the heart. And so we see the interplay between those two in terms of the blood providing the nutrients, but most critically in terms of those nutrients getting to the cells themselves, you need some sort of conduit, a certain pathway for them to do that. And the way these nutrients in terms of those present in the blood, how they get to the cells themselves. And we will have to remember, if you were to go back to SNF1, cells make up tissues make up organs by extension. So nutrients getting to the cells and by extension the organs and associated structures within the body, they do so via the different blood vessels associated with the body itself. And we look at those main blood vessels associated with the body. And it's very important, those blood vessels themselves. So the vascular system, as we know it and as relates to us, it's a closed system of vessels that transports blood to and from the lungs and body tissues. When we were looking at the cardiovascular system, there were two parts associated with it, and this is specifically relating to the last lecture when we are looking at the cardiovascular system and blood circulation throughout. So the circulation broken down into two. You have the systemic circulation and the pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation referring to the blood moving to the lungs, getting oxygen, and then going throughout the body via the systemic circulation. So it is very important to remember those two divisions associated with circulation of blood. Pulmonary circulation referring to the blood moving from the heart to the lungs, and then back to the heart again. Systemic circulation referring to the blood leaving the heart via the aorta and returning via the inferior and superior vena cava. That is very important in terms of maintenance of that system. So let's have a look at it here. On this, could you all see the arrow I'm waving around?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here we see the heart. The blue, as I often tell students, blood is never blue, right? This is only for diagrammatic, for the diagram itself. Let me just, yeah, right. This is just to show deoxygenated blood in terms of blue. And then the red is the oxygenated blood. So what do we see? In terms of the pulmonary circulation, that would refer to the blood, of course, leaving via, here it is, the pulmonary artery and going to both the left and the right lung, where it gets oxygenation, returns via the pulmonary vein to the left atrium, and then from the left atrium it goes to the left ventricle and then leaves via the aorta, entering the systemic circulation and goes throughout the body. Of course, now it is the cells take up the oxygen, as we mentioned before. Oxygen is critical for use by the cells in terms of breaking down the basic substance of food, namely glucose. So you have this oxygen within the level of the cell, oxygen plus glucose giving you carbon dioxide, water, and energy. After that, oxygen is taken away, right? The blood is deoxygenated. Not only is oxygen taken away, is given to the cells, but the carbon dioxide, which is produced as a waste product when you do break down glucose to produce that energy, carbon dioxide is taken up. And now this oxygen deficient blood returns to the heart via the inferior and superior vena cava into the right atrium, goes to the right ventricle, and then is pumped into the lung, enters the pulmonary circulation. So all here, in terms of it leaving and going to the heart, systemic circulation. Once it gets to the heart, going to the lungs, that of course is your pulmonary circulation. And just a reminder, anytime you hear the word pulmonary, pulmonary is associated with the lungs themselves, okay? All right, so what type of blood vessels do we have? We have two major types of blood vessels, arteries and veins. Which ones carry, if I were to ask you, which ones carry oxygen? What would you say? Let me hear you.
Arteries.
All right, good. And if I tell you, be a little more specific. There's one exception to that rule. There's one artery that carries deoxygenated blood, and which one is that?
The pulmonary
Very good. Yeah, the
artery.
pulmonary artery is the only artery in the body. Very good. The pulmonary artery is the only vessel, blood vessel in the body that actually carries deoxygenated blood. So why do they call it the pulmonary artery? Since it carries deoxygenated blood. Why did they carry the pulmonary artery? Anybody has an idea? Why didn't they just call it pulmonary vein and done? So why do they call the pulmonary artery pulmonary artery? Well, anybody wants to gander an answer? Yeah, give that some, yeah.
Something to do with lungs? I know lungs
Yeah,
is
it
pulmonary.
does, correct. But why do the artery part, since it's carrying, why didn't they just call it's carrying deoxygenated blood? Oh, so why do they just call it the pulmonary vein and done? Why it is they call the pulmonary vein when the blood is coming back from the lungs? Why do they call it the pulmonary vein? And I kind of give you the answer there. Usually when you look at this, anybody, I'm going to wait out yet. Anybody? Why do they, so in other words, why does the pulmonary artery carry deoxygenated blood?
No, I want to stop. Ouch.
Anybody has an idea?
Probably because it has characteristics like an artery.
One more time?
Probably because it has characteristics like an artery.
Which specific ones? That is true, but which particular, there's a specific characteristic it has. Which one is it? Oops.
The arteries are more thicker than veins.
Yeah. So the thing is this, you're very close, and I applaud you for that. So arteries and veins, when you do look at them, usually when you look at the in terms of the blood vessels leaving the heart, what are they usually called? The ones leaving the heart, right? So usually the arteries leave the heart and the veins bring blood to the heart, right? So the thing is, the blood is actually, that's why so in terms of deoxygenated blood, one is carrying deoxygenated blood, one is carrying oxygenated blood. So I gave you all the tools. Anybody wants to put them together to say then why the pulmonary artery is called the pulmonary artery? Even though it is carrying deoxygenated blood? Well, because,
So you said, you
yes,
said oxygenated blood comes from the heart, right?
usually, right, when you're
To the
looking,
vein.
so usually, yeah, when it's
Right.
leaving the heart, right, you call
Right.
arteries, veins bring it back and arteries carry them away, right?
Right.
So, well, I kind of give you the
Vein.
answer. I gave you the answer there. Yes. So
Right.
that's why they call it the pulmonary artery, because
Artery.
the blood is leaving the heart.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why they call it the pulmonary artery. You can use that definition then, not the one that is carrying deoxygenated blood, but because of the fact the blood is leaving the heart, they're calling it um, they call it the pulmonary artery, right? Because usually when you look at the heart setup, right, blood leaving the heart in terms of via the aorta, it leaves via an artery. Okay, so in terms of blood vessel types, you have arteries and veins. When the arteries get smaller, they're known as arterioles. When the veins get smaller, they're known as venules. And connecting the venules and the arterioles, you have the capillaries. And let's have a look to see what this setup looks like. So here, arteries, it gets smaller, it's an arteriole. And then you have the exchange occurring at the level of the capillaries. So between the arteriole and the venules, you will have capillaries. An interesting thing with capillaries, they are one cell thick. Right? They're not very, very thick. And because of the fact, one, they're not very thick, and two, because they have spaces between them, the capillaries are usually the site for exchange of gases and other nutrients because they're very small. You have to remember that. So this is another reason why, as some of us might be aware, if you blow your nose too hard, what happens? Sometimes when you have the cold and you blow too hard, your nose, you'll see blood come out in the catarrh. Of course, CATARRH is another word for snot, right? You would see it come out in there, blood. And conversely as well, you have capillaries in your lungs. And when you have like a cough and you're coughing very deeply and you do it a lot, you will see in terms of the mucus, you bring up blood in it. Because these things are not very thick at all. They're one cell thick. So we're talking about on the order of micrometers in across one of these cells themselves. Okay? let's look at an artery and a vein. Could somebody tell me what is some of the differences between an artery and a vein? What do veins have that arteries don't have? Let me hear you.
It has a valve. Veins have
Valve.
a valve.
Veins have valves in them. Yes, both vein and valve begin with the letter V. Right? And why do veins have valves? One word, beginning with B.
Backflow.
Backflow, right, to prevent backflow. And we'll go into a little more detail in a little bit. Very good. What other difference between an artery and a vein? Specifically related to this muscle here, the tunica media, or the middle tunic. Look at this thickness here, and look at this one here. Which one thicker? This one or this one? Which one thicker?
Arteries are thicker.
Right, they have a thicker muscular. So arteries in and of themselves, to move blood around, they could actually contract because they have this muscle layer here. So they could contract and move the blood along, whereas veins don't have that luxury. So what they have to do, usually veins are incorporated or associated with muscles, right? So when the muscle, we're talking skeletal muscle. So when the skeletal muscle contracts, they now will contract and move the blood along with them. So as the blood moves along, they wouldn't want it going backwards. So that's why they have these valves to prevent the blood going backward. All right? Any other difference? So by extension, let's look at the lumen or the diameter. Which one generally has a bigger diameter, arteries or veins? In this case shown here, which one has a bigger lumen or space?
Veins.
Right, in this case, right, the vein has a bigger lumen because of the fact the artery has this thicker muscular layer or tunica media. Therefore, the lumen is smaller. All right, so we mentioned this in terms of the two circuits, pulmonary arteries, capillaries, pulmonary veins. And with the systemic, you have the aorta, you have the systemic capillaries and the systemic veins. So in terms of the exchange in the pulmonary circuit, the exchange of gases occurs via the capillaries in the lungs. And when we look at respiration, we'll get a little more detail into this. And with the systemic circulation, you have the capillaries in terms of the exchange occurring between oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. It is facilitated by the systemic capillaries. That's where they're joined. All right, so this is showing the cardiovascular system. And as I mentioned, the pulmonary circuits referring to the movement of blood to and from the heart to the lungs. And then the systemic is everything else, leaving the heart and going throughout the body itself. All right, so the blood vessels, right, they have three layers, or tunics as they're called. A tunic is a coat. I don't know if anybody here into fashion, but sometimes you will hear the term tunic referring to a coat. So in terms of the structures associated with the blood vessel, you have an inner endothelium, a middle layer, which consists of smooth voluntary muscle, and then you have an outer supportive connective tissue. So the middle layer, right, the smooth voluntary muscle, is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. Therefore, that movement occurs without our knowledge, right? And it's thinner in veins. So we looked at that just now. The arteries themselves have a thicker middle layer or tunica media, and it is controlled by the autonomic nervous system in terms of the movement around the body itself. So that movement of blood throughout the body, very importantly, it is under the control of the autonomic nervous system. So we don't even have to think about it, and it does happen. All right, when you look at these two, which one is an artery and which one is a vein? This one over here is the artery. There's the artery over here.
No, sir.
What is this over here? How do you know it's a vein?
Because it's smaller.
Yeah, but look at right, it marked V-E-I-N right here, vein. Yeah.
Yes, so we see that, but we didn't want to say that.
Quite so, but you're quite right, it is smaller, right? So the vein, V-I-N, and here it is artery. Now, just now when we were looking at it, we were looking comparatively, if they were of the same size, an artery and a vein, the lumen would be smaller. But in this case, what we would notice, arteries are generally larger when they're placed next to the associated vein. They're usually larger, as shown here in cross section. Right? And here is the darkened layer here that is thicker. That is the tunica media, smooth muscle associated with the artery itself. So it's a thicker layer. If you notice on the vein, it is thinner. What is this out here? All these white things. What are they? Styrofoam? Is it styrofoam out here? No. What is these white things? What do you think these white things are? It's something that doesn't stain very well. And it's a type of tissue. It begins with A and also you could call it a three-letter word that begins with F.
The adipose.
Very, I heard somebody say it, fat. Yeah, very good. Right?
Yeah.
So adipose tissue or fat, they don't pick up the stain. That's why it remains white. Whereas everything else, they do pick up the stain, and that's why it gets colored. Right? So usually 10 to 1, whenever you do get, let's say, a slide, and you don't see any of the white, you see white, like a lot of white background, 10 to 1 is usually fat. Right? That is present, because unless it's a very special stain. Right? But usually when you see a normal stain and you see a lot of white, that usually implies fat is present there. Okay, good. So let's talk a bit about the systemic arteries and look at some of them. Aorta, biggest one. Yeah, it's the largest artery in the body and it receives the blood from the left ventricle. It branches then to all the other organs themselves. So let's have a look, and I just want to point out some of the main ones in terms which you should take note of. All right, so here we have the heart and the aortic arch shown here. So the blood is coming. What is the pressure of blood in this region here? What do you think it will be right here? If you had to give two figures, what over what? Why do you think the pressure will be right here? Now coming out of the heart.
120 over 80.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's exactly it. 120 in terms of for a normal person without any heart issues, it'll be 120 over 80 coming directly out of the heart in terms of the systolic versus the diastolic pressure. Very good. All right, 120 over 80. And then what happens? It branches. Here we have the branching, the left subclavian, left common carotid, right common carotid, and then all the other associated ones. The celiac trunk goes to the left gastric, of course, gastric arteries, going to the stomach. So very important in terms of getting to the stomach here, in terms of that blood circulation to keep the tissues alive there. Splenic artery goes to the spleen. Hepatic goes to the liver, shown here. The renal artery, very important. Renal artery goes to the kidneys, and it's very important to note that in terms of with blood pressure, kidneys, they work by a process of pressure filtration. We look at that when we do look at the production of urine and its associated the associated workings of the kidneys. We look at that in a couple lectures down. But it's very important to note, however, that pressure filtration is key to the functioning of the kidneys themselves. Here you have the gonadal arteries. These are going to the gonads or the testes, and the ovaries are shown here, and the different ones there. Okay, let's get to a diagram, and I'll just point out the important ones, which you should be able to identify. So coming from the arteries themselves, you have the brachiocephalic artery. You should be able to pick this one out, label it. Subclavian. Why do they call this subclavian the subclavian? In terms of the skeletal system, if you could throw your brain back to SNF1, what structure runs right here in the human body on a skeleton? Right here, it's a bone that... Clavicle, very good. So this one, what it's saying is then that this artery runs right just about or below the clavicle. So sub means below, and clavicle refers to the fact that it's close to the, clavian refers to the fact that it's close to the clavicle, so they call it the subclavian artery. And here we have the brachiocephalic artery. So it goes to the subclavian, brachial artery, very important for pulse, radial artery, and the ulnar. Now, why do they call it radial and ulnar? Again, in terms of the bones from the skeleton, the radial bone always, goes with the thumb, And the ulnar goes, well, that'll be the other one going on the opposite side. That's how you could always track in terms of if you do have a skeleton, how you'd know which one is which, radius and ulnar. So the radial artery lines up with the radius and the ulnar with the ulnar, which is why they call it that. Okay. Digital, sorry, these go with the fingers here in terms of the arteries. So do take note of these arteries here. Femoral, what is the main bone here associated, which is why they call this the femoral. What is your thigh bone? Another name for your thigh bone?
Femur.
Your femur, very good. Right, so that's why they call it the femoral. Mentioned last week in terms of the popliteal, very important. And it's a soft spot from behind. I think everybody can identify with that. Touch behind your knee. You'll realize it's very, and if you press hard enough, you will get a pulse. You could actually get a pulse there. But it's a weak spot, right? Because yeah, you do get access to this deep running artery very easily, right behind your kneecap. All right, so always remember, protect behind your knees, right? When in doubt, squat, in that regard. So that's a artery that runs right behind the knee that is shown there. All right. Then coming down here, you have your tibial artery, so-called because your major, what's the other name for your shin bone? The bone that runs here, it's your
Tibia and
tibia. Yeah, your tibia. So hence, right, your tibia and your fibula. So they are so-called tibial and fibular arteries, right? So do take note of those. So those are the major ones associated with the body itself. With the head and neck, take note the common carotid, that's the one that comes up. You have your facial artery and the maxillary artery, right? Right, very important, going to the maxilla there. Maxilla and mandible, right? Which mandible is the upper jaw, maxillary is the lower, sorry, the maxillary is the upper jaw, mandible is the lower one. Okay, we do have to take note of anastomosis. This is not on the syllabus for us. All right, so the veins now. Arteries usually carry oxygenated blood, with the exception of the pulmonary artery. Veins usually carry deoxygenated blood, with the exception of the pulmonary vein. All right, so let's have a look at some of the major ones. And here is your external jugular. Superior vena cava, superior and inferior vena cava, so called because superior comes from above the heart, inferior comes from below the heart. And then you, yes, go ahead.
What this slides we sent in the classroom, like I've seen everything, but I didn't see it on the slides itself. I just saw
Sorry,
the
sorry,
lecture.
say that again, please.
I asked if the slides would be posted in the classroom also because I just saw the lecture, not this slide.
Oh, well, actually, I didn't post them, no, but I could. I could do that, yes. Okay, I'll
Okay,
post them, right? Yeah, I'll post them. Okay, right, so superior and inferior vena cava. And here you have the hepatic, renal, lumbar, hepatic liver, renal, kidneys, lumbar, very important, coming, of course, in relation to the vertebra, gonadal going to your gonads or reproductive structures. And then you have your femoral vein, just like how you have your femoral artery, femoral vein, popliteal, that's the one runs behind your knee, and the tibial vein, that's the one that runs right down in front of the shin. When you look at the head and neck, you have the internal jugular vein, the lingual vein, and the facial vein. Those are the major ones that you should take note of. All right. Now, this is on the syllabus, so I'll just touch on the hepatic portal system. So what is important with this hepatic portal system? Well, remember, from here you have your descending, here you have your descending colon, you also have your stomach. So blood is actually returning in terms of from the stomach itself, and this is of course nutrient laden, and from your descending colon. From your descending colon, in terms of the nutrients, mainly water is reabsorbed from the level of the descending colon. But they're all coming back in terms of the blood associated with these structures. It's returning. And before they go in back into the heart to enter the circulation, they have to go through processing at the level of the filter, of the liver itself. So the hepatic portal system, this refers to the blood that is returning from your organs, namely spleen, stomach, and your intestines. They go through the liver and then they enter the inferior vena cava before returning into the pulmonary circulation, and then by extension the systemic circulation. So they go through the liver where the liver cleans it and does numerous other things to it. Very important. So the liver, the blood, before it goes back into the heart, has to go through the liver itself. And this system of the blood returning from the organs to the liver, then to the inferior vena cava, is known as the hepatic portal system. This is very important in terms of maintenance of the blood integrity. Okay, so in terms of the capillary exchange, between arteries and veins, it does occur because of the fact that you do have a change in pressure, a pressure change. And again, one of the important things that we did mention here in cross-section, we're looking at a capillary. Do note that you have these spaces occurring in the capillaries that allow nutrients and gases to move freely across them. When you're looking at the arterioles and veins, you cannot have this happening. Not that you cannot, but it's very difficult because remember, they're not one cell thick. And they do have the linings associated with them, connective tissue. They have a very thin middle layer and an internal layer as well. So you don't have the free movement of things across it. So the capillaries are very important to allow the exchange of gases as it occurs at the level of the lungs. And that is very, very important because if you didn't have the capillaries, then you'd have to have another mechanism for gaseous exchange to occur. All right, so to keep that in mind. Anytime you hear the word capillary, what should immediately come to mind? One cell thick, and they allow or facilitate exchanges, gaseous gas exchange to occur. Right? So how blood returns to the heart? Let's have a look to see of its incorporation in terms of veins with the skeletal muscle. All right, so we're looking at the calf muscle itself. What is this muscle called again? It begins with G. It's a big name. Well, not big name, but it's
the gastrocnemius muscle.
Very good. I wonder if the C is silent. Is gastrocnemius or gastrocnemius or gastrocnemius? Does it have a C in there? It has a C in terms of gastrocnemius, or it's gastrocnemius? Okay. So it have a C? You can have a quick look. I think, no, you might be right, in terms of gastrocnemius muscle. Nemius. Yeah, the gastrocnemius. Yeah, you're right, the gastrocnemius. No, it has a C, yeah. I'll have to check to see if that C is silent. You might be onto something there, I just never thought about that. But the gastrocnemius muscle, it's spelled with a C. So this muscle, or the calf muscle, if you notice that the vein runs right between the two halves of the gastrocnemius muscle. So when you have contraction of the gastrocnemius muscle, what it actually does is it pumps blood towards the heart itself. Excuse me. Yeah, just 1 second. I just have a bit of a cough. Okay, So the gastrocnemius muscle associated with the vein here, so that when you do have, as you see here, this person is up on their toes, so you have contraction of the muscle itself, and what that does, it forces the blood up the up to this vein, and then ultimately to the inferior vena cava, into the heart itself. So that is very important where that is concerned. And this little exercise is important. We mentioned it last day, and some people gave me an hallelujah, amen on that. Some of the older persons in church, you know, when they're standing up for long periods, you might see them going up on their toes. And that's actually a very good thing, because it prevents the pooling of blood in the lower extremities. When they get up on their toes, they're actually flexing the gastrocnemius muscle, allowing them the return of blood to the heart. We have to remember it's only 4 to 5 liters we have, depending on the size of the person. So you really don't want blood to be pooling around your legs, right? Because if it does pool, well, what happens is, in terms of the exchange of oxygen throughout the body, well, that begins to go down, and you'll start to feel a little lightheadedness. And then that leads to you'll pass out, which is why, you know, sometimes on military parades, you will see persons passing out, notwithstanding the heat, but because of the fact they're standing static, they're not moving around. So you will have blood pooling in the legs. So in essence, then the circulating blood is actually decreased. So that's why it's important. If it is you're standing for extended periods of time, ever so often, just go up on your toes, up and down, and you wouldn't faint. You wouldn't faint because of the fact the circulation will keep moving, you know, to moving that blood back to the heart. Okay, right? So pulse. Did you all do that in skills lab yet? In terms of pulse, it is not on the syllabus for us, but did you all do it in skills lab?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, in terms of the different pulse, where to take them and so on. So that is very important. And of course, using the Stigma Manometer. All right. As I mentioned to you, it's a very interesting spelt word. How I pronounce it is just like say fig and put a S in front of it. So it says fig, right? Stigma Manometer. So Stigma Manometer, very important in terms of measuring pulse. But as we are well aware, I hear what some of you are saying, sir, well, now we have the automatic one, yes, you know, but they still train you, you know, to use the Stigma Manometer, which is the manual way of taking your blood pressure. But they do have the automatic ones now, where you just put it on and it will give you the readings. In fact, it goes even better than that. Now you do have certain apps that would give you well, heart rate. It gives you the heart rate. I don't know. Anybody have an app on their phone that gives them the heart rate? Anybody? I have one on my phone. What's the name? I wonder if I took it off. Yeah, it's still there. Anybody have an app on their phone for heart rate?
Yes, so on Samsung, it does monitor your heart rate when you put your finger by your camera.
Yeah, I have. I'm looking for mine. I'm not seeing it now. Oh yeah, look at that. In fact, the name of the app is Heart Rate. So anybody, if you don't have it, you know, it does come standard with Samsung phones, you're quite right. But just go to the App Store and type in Heart Rate, Heart space RATE. Right, so the heart rate app, it will give you your heart rate. And you just put your finger on the light, on the lens, the camera lens. And what it does, it actually shines the lens, well, the flashlight, the light comes on. And in terms of what it does, it captures the flow of blood through one of the capillaries in the tip of your finger. And when your heart is beating, the flow is actually pulse. And the blood moves in through the capillaries. You know, it does so in a pulsing motion. And what that app allows the phone to do is to actually capture that movement when the heart beats in terms of the movement of the blood through the capillary. And that is what is sensed. And it is recorded then as, you know, your heart rate gives you your heart rate. So it's a nice tool to have, you know, to just check ever so often to see if your quote unquote blood pressure high, you know, if you're in a stressful situation, or if you're just feeling, you know, a little, you know, ill, you might feel your heart feeling a little funny, or you just might be feeling a little unwell. You know, it's good to check your heart rate in that regard. Yeah. I know for the Apple phone as well, there exists this something you have to buy, which actually gives you a EKG reading. You know, the PQRST wave. It appears on the phone, but you have to buy these two pads that actually plug into the phone. So you put your fingers on them, and it's able to give you that EKG reading. So do keep abreast of these things. I don't think it has one that could give you blood pressure though, in terms of apps just yet. Let me just look real quick to see if I could answer that question, because that's a very good question to ask, right? If there are any apps for blood pressure, I'm not sure if there are any on the market currently. Blood pressure apps for Android, blood pressure taker, well, I guess so. Knock me over with a feather, right? So there are some apps out there for Android. Anybody has any apps on their phone that could take blood pressure, that they could give a testimony for? I know about the ones for the blood pressure. I guess there is, yeah, right? So it's good to have these, even though they'll tell you, it gives you a good. It'll be good to actually do a Stigma Manometer reading and then to use the phone and see, you know, how close it is. So there are apps available there. So in your leisure, you should try to see if there are any free downloads and try it out for yourself. Let's get back to the lecture. So the things that affect the pulse, your body size, gender. Who tends to have higher blood pressure, males or females? And by extension, who usually die first in a relationship, men or women? Notwithstanding age. So if age is not a factor, but in general, in terms of if you look at morbidity and mortality reports, who tend to live longer, women or men?
Woman.
Yeah. Women tend to live longer than men. And one of the reasons which is strongly associated with it is because of the fact that it is believed that women handle stress a lot better than men. Right? That's one of the contributing factors, because what do women do when they have a stressed out situation? What do you all do? Well, what do you all do? If I were to ask you that.
We speak about it and let them know what the problem is.
Yeah, you talk it out, right? You call your little sister circle or what have you. Now you talk it out. What do men do?
Drink and all kind of nonsense.
Correct. Internalize. They internalize it. They wouldn't talk about it, right? Internalize it. And as you're right, they say they turn for comfort and drink and other things, right? And you know that's how they handle it. But they don't verbalize it or talk it out. And simple as that might sound, that is one of the major reasons why it is believed men have, on average, higher blood pressure and cardiovascular diseases associated with the heart particularly. And that is why they're often called to the other side a lot sooner than women, because women handle stress better than men. So always remember that in terms of when you're in a stressful situation, it's always good. See if you could find a good friend or somebody you could talk to. Or if not, get a dog and talk to the dog. But it's always good to verbalize it, right? Ideally, talk with somebody else. Get that stress out. And that will extend your life. Think about it from that perspective. Muscular activity also affects your pulse. How does muscular activity affect your pulse? What do they mean by that? Anybody wants to elaborate for me? How does muscular activity affect your pulse rate?
I think it decreases the pulse rate.
I hear what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Well, okay, so I hear two answers. One person saying in the short term, it does increase it. So let's say if you were at rest, your pulse rate would be 1, let's say at a value X, but then if you start to run, it will go up to X plus whatever. So it would increase. But if you keep exercising over a long period of time, you would find that your resting pulse rate would actually start to go down, right? And that's already when you really have a certain level of fitness, So that's why I think that was the person was trying to intimate when they say it goes down when you exercise over a period of time. You're talking about for months or maybe even years. Your resting pulse rate or your resting heart rate would actually go down, right? When you're quote unquote fully fit, right? But as a rule, of course, once you do start to exercise, like we're talking on the order of seconds, or you now start, yes, your pulse rate will go up. Very important there. Emotion. How does emotion change your pulse rate? Let me hear you. Emotion.
Your pulse rate would increase.
Yeah, like if you see somebody good looking coming, woo, the heart starts to go, right? Your heart rate starts to go up, right? What other situation your heart rate would start to go up? Associated with, of course, those things are under the control of adrenaline. Are there any other situation where adrenaline will increase your heart rate?
If you're scared
If you're scared, correct is right.
or angry.
Or angry, yes. Right? We have any badger in the class? No? Or if somebody corners you, yeah? You ever get cornered? What do you mean by corner? You see, when you corner somebody, right? Which is why I know it have some people that like to aggravate persons, and I think I shared this for those who took SNF1 with me. I did mention that to you. It have some people who they derive pleasure out of seeing other people get angry. You all know people like that? And they'll deliberately taunt you. They'll deliberately taunt you just to get you angry, and they getting happier seeing you get angry. It have some people who are special like that. So now that's very dangerous, and I'll tell you why. Because when you are taunting people and you see they're getting angrier, there's something it could tap into. There's a reflex mechanism, right? That's called the fight or flight response. Right? And that was created, or it's still written into your genes, if you were to look at it that way, still written into your genes. And when you do get somebody's cornering you or somebody's making you angry, you could actually tap into that gene. And what it does, it causes the release of adrenaline. Now, the thing with adrenaline, when adrenaline is released, right, into your body's system, it overrides the normal, rational way you think. And just for a brief moment, because what you need to do, you need actually to remove yourself from the situation or to fight. So that's why they call it the fight or flight response. Adrenaline release, and you have a whole lot of things happening, right? You have dilation of your pupils, your heart rate goes up, you'll start to actually sweat, right? Because the muscles are getting ready to contract. You're going to do one out of two things. It's either fight or flight. Run or stand your ground and actually fight. So I always tell people, be cautious, in terms of taunting or teasing people. If you see the blood, they're getting louder and angrier, somebody better walk away from there. All right? Or usually the outcome could be disastrous. And then what you have happening when they interview any person, what they'll say, I don't know what happened, just for like a blackout, for 3 seconds, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, boom, this thing happened. So always remember that, please, if you see you're taunting somebody, they're getting angry, it's good to step back. It's a very smart indication to step back. One way, one surefire way of knowing if you're really getting somebody ticked off, if you see the vein in the center crossing the forehead or, the forehead, right, between the eyebrows and the hairline, if you see that vein start to stand up, yeah, that is a good indication for you to step back. Yeah, what usually follows after that is they will lash out. So please, don't taunt people unnecessarily. In terms of pulse, it is influenced by body temperature and thyroid secretion, right? So in terms of body temperature, if you're in hot weather, what happens to your body temperature? If things are hot, does it go up or does it drop? If you're very hot, so let's say, for instance, if you're outside, if the external temperature is high, what happens?
Body temperature goes up.
Right, your body temperature will go out. So, of course, there's a compensatory mechanism that kicks in because your core temperature has to remain constant. What is your core temperature, internal body temperature? What is it?
32.
32 degrees Celsius?
No, 36.
36, yeah, that's what I was saying. 36. It's 36 degrees Celsius. And it stays like that all the time. So anytime you start, but you were close. So that's very good. Anytime you deviate away from 36, your body will look to bring it back down to 36. So if it is outside, it's very hot, and then you have by conduction, your internal temperature is going up, your body will then start mechanisms to cool off, right? And that includes vasodilation and sweating that actually cools you down. And conversely, if you're very cold and you need to raise your temperature, what does your body do? Think about it in the night when rain falling and your room cool. What you start to do? Well, you are no coverlet or a significant other. You begin to shiver, right? Very good. So that's 2 ways in terms of how your body regulates temperature. All right. Blood pressure, we mentioned that, is determined by cardiac output and the blood vessel resistance to blood flow. Right? Cardiac output, very important. And as somebody mentioned, in terms of your cardiac output, if you habitually exercise, your cardiac output in terms of your blood pressure, it begins to go down. So it's always a good idea to exercise. Some people might remember in terms of Costatin South, right? If you're coming from, let's say, by the hospital side, that was a nice little walk, eh? You're walking down Independence Avenue, and then you turn up on Sutton Street, coming up there by Irving Park, and then you come down to Costa. That's a nice little walk. Or you're coming from the other side, you come up High Street, Mokorapo Road, Mokorapo Street, right? Or some people cut across, come to the cemetery side there, ting-ling-ling, and you come across on Gomez, and then you reach there, boom. But that was a nice little walk, right? And I'm sure some of you all missing that walk. Anybody missing the walk?
Yeah, I'm missing it.
Yeah, that was a nice.
Every day I used to walk, yeah.
That was a real nice little exercise to get there. All right, so notwithstanding the fact that you're not getting it, see if you could find some place either around your home or somewhere else, where you could pick up that little exercise. Cardiac output, right? Stroke volume, in terms of volume of blood pump out, is the heart rate times the stroke volume. And in terms of things that offers resistance to blood flow, this is not on the syllabus, but I will talk briefly on it. It has to do with the elasticity of the blood vessels, the viscosity of your blood, and your total blood volume. So interestingly enough, if you have severe hemorrhaging brought about by some external trauma, let's say a laceration by a weapon or otherwise, what you would find is your blood pressure begins to go up because it has to compensate for that loss of blood which occurs. So blood pressure measurement, you're almost finished here. The systolic occurs during heart contraction, 120 millimeters of mercury, and the diastolic, when the heart is relaxed, which is 80 millimeters of mercury. And this is our good friend, the Stigma Manometer, in terms of the measurement which you all spoke of, and you all looked at it at the in your skills lab. So let's take note of the terminology associated with blood vessels themselves. We have hypotension, hypertension. Hypo is lower than usual, hyper is high blood pressure. So these two, very important to take note of. And when would you have hypertension? What are some of the things that bring about hypertension? I think we did mention stress is one of them. Anything else that brings about hypertension in terms of diet? What in your diet could actually raise your blood pressure? Salt. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Salt. So you always have to watch your salt intake. Could you cook without salt? Is there anything that you could use to replace salt when you're cooking?
No. Even though the seasoning them have salt, but oh gosh, it still lack the salt.
Yeah, we have any serious vegetarian or people here. Sometimes some people say you could put lemon juice, but it's not quite the same. It's not quite the same. So you just have to develop a taste then for lower salt. But is food in and of itself, is it very salty? Like when you're buying food outside. Let's say fried chicken. Is it very salty? And the answer is, oh yeah, it's very salty. And why do you think it's very salty? Because your body needs salt. Salt is very important. And why is salt very important? Which organ system, which organ system depends on salt? Which organ system needs salt? That is very important for them for its proper functioning. Which organ, which one of the organ systems, right? We have 11. Which one?
The skin, sir.
The hormone one,
Which one? Is 11 of them? Is one out of the 11? Which one?
It's the nervous
is that
system.
the one
Very
responsible
good.
for
Thank you
carrying
very
hormone?
much.
Which one is it?
Somebody just said it, the nervous system, right? So your nervous system, it needs salt. If you remember generation of action potential, where you have the sodium channels opening and the sodium going in, depolarizing the membrane, right, and generating the action potential that moves along the inside. So salt is critical, which is why when you think of when you're dehydrated, it's not only a question of getting water, returning water to the person, but you have to get the salt in, which is why when you're thinking in usually the normal saline, we're not talking the Ringer solution. When somebody presents at the hospital and they're, let's say their blood pressure is low or they look pale and so on, you would hook up an IV, a saline IV. It's not just water, but it's saline. If you look at the bag, it says saline, right? And even the Ringer solution, which they also put in the IV, it has a good amount of salt in it because salt is critical for your nervous system. Persons who are dehydrated, when you think about babies, what do you give them? If a baby is dehydrated, as a mother, what do? You go to the drugstore and you ask for what?
G-Sol.
G-Sol. Anybody ever taste G-Sol?
Yeah.
It's just basically salt and sugar. That is all, salt and sugar is G-Sol, right? So it's very, and then you mix it in water and you give it to the baby, right? So very important in terms of salt and sugar. But salt is the more important one. Salt, critical. So all that being said, which is why your body, it has like a mechanism that tells it, hey, salt important. And these people who cook food, they abuse that fact that how your body has its part. Somewhere written in your genes again, it have a part that says salt important, so they overdo it. So if you ever realize when you're eating things which are salty, oh, yum, yum, right? It's like you're wondering why. Because your body is saying it knows that salt is very, very important, yeah, in that regard. So that is why you have to be careful in terms of your salt intake because you run the risk of having high blood pressure. High blood pressure is known as the silent killer because of the fact it has really no symptoms, right? And it just, of course, once your blood pressure is consistently high, it causes damage to the lining of the blood vessels and by extension also to the cardiovascular system. All right, so always remember when you manage your salt, all right, that is important where that is concerned. All right, I want to say this is not on the syllabus. Right, it's just talking about atherosclerosis in terms of buildup of plaque within the artery, not on the syllabus. Not on the syllabus. Varicose veins, you might be familiar with those, just because the compliance or the ability of the veins themselves have lost a certain amount of compliance, so they remain bulged, and that's why they look like that. Okay, so what did we look at today? Well, we looked at blood vessels, particularly arteries and veins, and their subdivisions. Arteries are the arterioles, veins, venules, and how they're connected together via the capillaries. Capillaries are very important because of the fact they are one cell thick. We mentioned, of course, the pulmonary and systemic circulations. Pulmonary referring to the circulation around from the heart in terms of blood moving from the heart via the pulmonary artery, deoxygenated blood leaving the heart, going to the lungs themselves, returning via the pulmonary vein to the left atria, the left ventricle, and then of course going into the systemic artery. That's very important there. We mentioned some of the major arteries and veins in the body itself, and also by extension, we did mention how these arteries and veins are named. A lot of them are named because of the fact of the surrounding skeletal system parts which are close by, such as the mentioned the ulnar, the radial artery, and so on, because of the presence of the ulnar and radius bones. So these are some of the things which we did look today, and that's it in terms of for the lecture. Now for the lab itself, things had a little issue with that. So the lab will be posted at 12 o'clock today. So come 12 o'clock, you will be asked then to just go and do the exercise, which you will find in the lab. But it will be present. It will be posted at 12 o'clock today, not the usual 11 o'clock. Okay? Any questions?
So no, that's not a question, that's a reminder.
In terms of posting the lecture?
Yes, I suppose a
Okay.
person the lectures.
Nah, I never say lectures. All right, yeah. I say lecture. I say lecture.
So you
I say
don't
one.
post the slides in the e-classroom?
No, I don't actually. So this will be
Oh,
something novel. One thing I'll probably do. I said I would post the one today. I'll do that, but it might have a copyright issue. That's the only thing. So I'll have to clear it with the course coordinator, and then I'll be able to post the others. So I'll post the one for today.
okay, but is
But
there a reason as to why you don't post that? Because I know normally they're supposed to slides in the e-classroom.
right. So let me just say it again. You probably missed what I just said.
Oh,
So
the copyright.
yeah, I just said that. Yeah, you probably missed it. So
Okay, no
yeah,
problem.
so that's the only reason why. So that's why I said I have to clear it with the course coordinator, and then I'll be able to post the others. So I'll be able to do the one today, but for the others, I'll just have to clear it first. Okay.
Okay,
All
no
right.
problem.
All right. Anybody else?
So,
Yes. Go ahead.
the lab you're posting at 12 is you're doing that today one time as well?
I'll put the instructions, and I'll try to be as explicit as I can in terms of the instructions themselves. All right. Usually, I'll give you a 24-hour period to complete it. I wouldn't just give you a short 1 hour or 2 hours. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. 2 hours too short for you all to complete it logistically in terms of contacting everybody. Because I know I gave it for one. In terms of feedback, 2 hours sufficient, or you all would want a 24-hour period? Let me hear you.
24.
24 hours, please.
24 hours, sir.
2 hours a little tight for you. It'd be a little
Yes,
tight to be
sir.
calling people. Yeah, I noticed I was getting a lot of chat on that. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, I'll give you a 24-hour period. Now for next week, and I'm giving you all sufficient notice. Now every week is a very good idea, right? To always revisit. Remember from week 1, I did, and I'll post it actually in the. No, it actually is posted in the e-classroom under the lecture. You know the week at a glance, and it would show that next week is your first assessment is due. Now, with the first assessment, you'll have a 24-hour window to do it, right? And I would post it on Sunday. So not tomorrow, but next Sunday. So let me make that absolutely clear before some people start to catch Malkady. So the first assessment, if you look at the course outline, your week at a glance, which is on the e-classroom lecture under the announcements, you will see that not tomorrow, but the following Sunday, right? The assessment will be posted. You have 24 hours. It wouldn't be long. At most, it'll probably be an hour in terms of the window for the actual time for the exam. It would be about hour 15 minutes, if so long, right? But it will be not this Sunday, but next Sunday, and you'll have a 24-hour window to do it. It'll be in the e-classroom itself, multiple choice. It'll be multiple choice, and it might have some true-false questions in it, but mainly multiple choice, if not all multiple choice. Okay. So that would, all the details on it is already there if you were to just look in the week at a glance. So what is a week at a glance? You all know where to find the week at a glance. Just go to the e-classroom, look under announcements, and there are 3 PDFs there. One of them says week at a glance, and it'll tell you which ones you have to know. So I would say mainly multiple choice questions, right? If not all multiple choice questions, it'll be something like, I would say 30 questions to do in like 50 minutes. Okay, so you have like an hour. I mean, at least 1 minute, and you can do the math. A minute and a half, a little longer than a minute and a half per question, and it'll just be based on the topics that well, everything is there in the e-classroom under week at a glance. All right. So for the lab, like I mentioned, at 12 o'clock, you do check the lab itself. Go to the lab page, and you will see the lab there. You'd have 24 hours to do it. We good? Everybody's eyes okay? All right. Let me just check. Let me just check roll, and then we would call. We call that a day. Okay. Let me just call back roll. For those who have missed, this is SNF2 Saturday. Attendance. Let me see. Celine, Ali, in here? Janelle, Alfonso.
Yes, sir. Here. Good morning.
Good morning. Khalil, no, Camille Fortune.
Present, sir.
All right. Lutrick Griffith.
Present. Good morning, all.
Hi, morning. Khalil Khan.
Good morning, sir. Yes, I'm present.
All right, morning. Miss Lawrence Mohammed.
Yes, sir.
Miss Avion Lee. Miss Crystal Manrakan, sorry. Not here,
So we only here.
That's you there, Crystal?
So this is Avion.
Avian? Avian Lee?
Yeah.
Okay. Crystal not here. Sacha? Nope. Ashley Mongrel?
Present.
Okay.
Present, sir.
Who is that? Sacha? Sacha, that is you. Just answer. Present, sir.
Yes, sir.
Excellent.
Yes, sir. Sasha.
Swinelia? Okay, thank you. Swinelia? I know if all you hearing rain. All you hearing rain in the background by me? No?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it all rain by all you too? I don't sound
Yes,
by my
sir.
mother. Yeah. It
Yes,
all
sir. Yeah,
rain.
that
You gotta be careful. Well, hear me, but at least, if you don't have to, it's supposed to have rain. We are now rain watch until Monday. You're not rain watch, but you know bad weather. So do keep that in mind. Swinelia, you there? Swinelia not there. Kezia?
Present, sir.
All right.